And there we are. We are live 40 minutes past the hour. So
as usual, we're doing well.
As usual, we are doing well. Yeah, that's right. It's our live show. We can do it however we want to, right?
That's true.
Yes. So here we are. Welcome to Thursday, our live Q&A show. And we had a friend pop in who we were chatting with.
Yeah.
And so we prioritized chatting with our friend.
Yep.
And I have no regrets. So here we are. And this is a show where we answer questions that you guys have submitted. And I am going to take a second and share the video. So for everybody that's watching, so as you're tuning in, comment, let us know where you're coming in from, and take a second and like the video, share the video, do all the things with the videos that help us. So where do you find those?
Oh, dope toques.
Yes.
This toque is from
Erin does a good job with that, doesn't she?
Hi, David Boda. By the way, this is by a ladies brand, Jackson Lennon. It's like a small boutique brand that I picked up in BC a couple weeks ago.
I have one as well. So I have a dope toque as well.
You do?
Yeah, except I don't call it a toque. It's a beanie.
Two. Yeah.
Yes.
Hi, Lauren.
Yes.
Hi, Berta.
Wonderful to see everybody jumping on. Just trying to share the video and having problems sharing it. Nope, that's not working. So, okay. I can't figure that out. That's all right. So take a second and share it. That would be helpful. So since I can't figure out how to do it. Wonderful to see everybody jumping on. We have, as you can see by the video topic, our topic is the struggle with, and again, those are all questions that have been asked to us in response to different resources we put out, that kind of stuff. Can you address this topic? Can you address this question? And so if you want to have your question addressed, you can post it in the comments here and we'll get to it. Or you can send us an email, send us a message on Facebook, and we'll get to it that way as well. So, Berta, that would be
thanks, Berta.
very appreciated as well, because I will be traveling to Texas next week. So I'm excited for that. So
I am too. I'm going to ship a bunch of stuff.
Right, so that I can pick it up.
I want to buy in America.
Yes, that's right.
But I appreciate that, Berta. It really does make a difference.
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah.
And I'm happy to pick up the stuff for you. So the topic at hand this week is the struggle with connecting with God. And because that's a struggle for most of us, for all of us, I think. And what does that look like? And then from that place, the struggle of connecting with God is the struggle of staying connected.
Why don't you read the question?
The question that was submitted was more a statement, but a statement of a topic to address is I struggle most with connecting. The thing I struggle most with is connecting with God and staying in his presence all the time. I get brought out and I long just to be with God. And so, it's a very real struggle. And it's not exactly like that's a new struggle. That's a struggle that people have had. And so what are your thoughts on that topic?
What are my thoughts?
Yes.
Well, there's different angles to
come
at it from. I think it's very relatable. And like the first thing is to I don't want to project anything onto the question asker, but the first thing is to not feel shame or guilt for not being in the presence all the time.
Sure.
And I think I kind of go to like, well, what does that mean? Like, let's define, what does that look like?
Right.
Because I think you're going to have people who, when you hear being in the presence all day long, right? You're going to have people who go, well, how could I even do that? I have stuff to do.
Right.
Because they have an idea that being in God's presence means you're like physically separate. Right. And you're sitting and you're praying and you're feeling a tangible presence.
Sure.
And that is, that is a thing. Like that is a way that we sit and experience the presence of God. But I think what this person's maybe more asking is how can I remain in that place while still going to work and like living my life, like having my relationships and
for sure.
doing all my daily tasks. And, it's like like, can we be in God's presence while we're paying our bills or doing the dishes or, so I kind of, when I was thinking about the question, I kind of viewed it as, we do get popped out of God's presence. For me, the things that do it are like my feelings of fear or anxiety or stress, right? But for me, I think I define living in the presence of God as an absence of chaos from my life. And I don't mean an absence of chaos in the physical sense, because I often feel that my 3 children it feels chaotic. Like as in like there's like so much noise going over it. There's phone calls, there's stuff to do, but I mean inner chaos. Like for me, when I know I'm walking in the presence of God, when I don't feel an inner chaos, I feel like for me, I know I'm in the presence of God when I can be standing in the midst of chaos, wherever that might be. And I feel a calm internally. I don't feel, I feel separate from that.
Like a supernatural calm that's beyond what you have.
Yeah. I mean, the picture would be like you standing and there's a storm around you and you're unmoved. Like Jesus in the storm, he was unmoved.
Yeah.
To me, that like, those are the moments when I feel the most connected to God. And then that calm allows me to maintain who I am in the Lord, regardless of the chaos. Now, I have not been able to achieve that 24/7.
Yeah.
Not even close. I'm so influenced by so many things. But that's kind of how I define it. And I think being able to walk your life living from that place. And so maybe that means sometimes you're physically feeling a presence. I've had that. I'm doing something, I'm doing my dishes or whatever.
For sure.
And I'm praying and I'm speaking with the Lord. And sometimes I'm feeling a presence of God. And sometimes I'm just speaking with the Lord and I'm not feeling anything. So
yeah, it's not, I guess, go ahead.
I think it's good to remember, like there's, like I said, like give yourself grace for it. And be realistic. And then when you find yourself, I think they use the term I'm brought out. It's okay. So just take a breath and go back. And just find your way to find that calm, that presence. I think it's about building the presence within us and not trying to create an external presence. Because we can't control what's happening around us. But someone who's truly walking and embodying the presence of God could get in a car crash totally out of their control and remain. They're still having to deal with everything, but they could remain unmoved inside, which would allow them, I think, to act with incredible wisdom and love and grace in that situation.
Yeah. Yeah. So you're defining, and
I think that we could have different definitions and they're not necessarily right and wrong. We just can look at it different.
Yeah. So we have to define, what do we mean by the presence of God? And that's fine, Berta. I have to define what I mean by the presence of God, because some people, what they say by the presence of God, they mean a sort of hyper emotionalism, That's to them, they're, and we talked about this a little bit, I think last week, where my connection is based on my emotional integrity in the moment. And when do I feel loved? Do I feel happy? What do I feel? And so we end up making an idol of our feelings and mistaking that idol for God. And so am I defining his presence by the emotions that I feel? I need to look at that. And like you're saying, that sense of inner calm, and that sense of stability, all of that, right? And that's the, I would say I don't know that I'd say that's the presence of God versus that's the outworking of his abiding with you. And so that's like the ramifications for the presence of God with you, because I know, like David says it throughout the Psalms, I know God is for me and he's with me. And so I'm living from a place of trust and peace. I'm paraphrasing what he says, right? But it's something to that degree where I trust him, therefore I won't be shaken. So that sense of peace in the midst of chaos is the ramifications of knowing God is with you, whether that's a felt sense of his presence or a felt absence of his presence. And so having a conversation around that, the nuances of that makes a difference in how you address something like that. One of a couple different things to say is, I love this quote. I was just looking it up while you were talking, but I was also listening to you. By the 13th, 14th century German mystic named Meister Eckhart. He's a Christian mystic. He said, the place for a man to find God is where he last left him. Yeah. Right. It's just such a good, concise. And the whole point is that when your language, right, you got popped out of the presence of God. That's a kind of a funny analogy, but it's really what it feels like. And the thing to remember is that it's not God that popped you out. It's not God that moved somewhere else. No. Right? Yeah. God's stability says God never changes. God never goes anywhere. And so the issue is not so much has God moved from that place of encounter. The issue is, where has my heart gone? And where have I gone? Right? I always view like God is here, and then we're like all over the place, right? Like we're like the one in and out, and we go out and follow that trail and then realize, oh, that wasn't smart. Oh, this isn't great. Right, go back. Right. And we get pulled. Like, I will say, the more I come to know and desire the presence of God, the more I realize how influenced I am by everything out here. Yeah, that's true. Yes. Right? Yeah. Like how much all this stuff, all the noise of life, and it's not only negative things, even but how easily I will go out here and neglect this. Right. Yes. Right. Yeah, that's right. I think God gives you that walking with God is a continual experience of a foretaste of walking with him. Yeah. And so I am constantly shown what it could be like to walk with him, to entice me to walk with him, to give me an anticipation of what it's like to walk with him. So when he reveals his presence to me, he doesn't reveal his presence to me because I'm perfectly capable of receiving his presence. It's actually quite the opposite. He reveals his presence to me, and I'm perfectly incapable of receiving his presence. Right. And so I get a taste of what that's like, and I go, and I don't have an appetite for that. When I haven't tasted, I don't have an appetite for it. It's like I love Indian food, right? We both love Indian food. You didn't have an appetite for Indian food before you tasted it, but then you taste it and you go, oh my goodness, this is delicious. I want more of this, right? Which is why I think, side note, we have met many people, like when we've done street ministry, who've had a dream, right? So for there are people who either have never been to church, or if they have, it was not a good experience, right? God, church, all these kind of words are not good words for them, right? But they've had a dream where they saw a man in white or a light or something of heroic figure comes, and they'll say things like, I've never felt that peace in my real life. It's a taste of of what could be. Yeah, for sure. And we can tell them, like, let's pray for you. I think you can feel it again. Yeah. Right? Yeah. Yeah, I think that's literally exactly something they can only dream of. Yeah. You don't fabricate the presence of God. You can't. You can fabricate emotions, and then emotions can wane, and then you can say God has abandoned you
Yeah.
because you fabricated your emotions and you can't sustain that level of emotional input or output. And so that's exactly why we need to define what we're talking about. We're not talking about a hyper emotionalism. But
or no emotions. Because I feel like there's also a huge like teaching that says the real presence of God, you wouldn't feel an emotion.
Yeah, for sure.
Right? I think that's there as well.
Yes.
And we definitely don't mean that.
The presence of God is not, well, and this is the distinction then to make, is that
you can't make it.
The presence of God is not an emotion.
No.
But emotion can happen in response to the presence of God. Like at one point, Jesus rejoices I think it's in John 17, in the great prayer that he has. I think it's John 17, and it says he rejoices exceedingly. And that literally means that if you look at the actual translation of the words, it means he jumped about and spun wildly. Right? So that is an emotional exuberance in response to this deep, heartfelt communion with the Father in John 17. I think it's John 17. And so there's definitely there can be emotion involved. It's not like it's a dead emotion. And sometimes people there's in the Greek Orthodox Church, they talk about a state of dispassion. Mm-hmm. And when you first read that, you can think it means the death of emotions, right? You're not supposed to be passionate, but it means the passions in the history of Christianity are things like fear or anger or all the bad things you don't want, lust, that kind of stuff. And so what the teachings of the mystical authors in the Orthodox tradition is that the presence of God will lead you to a state of dispassion, which means fear will no longer hold sway over you. Anger will no longer hold sway over you. Lust will not hold sway over you. And through the course of the prayer life, what happens is essentially you retrain the drive within you for lustful desire. Mm-hmm. And that begins to purify itself and turn itself to the Father. And so it's no longer the carnal nature of lust, it's the desire for the presence of God, right? But it's the same capacity within you to long and want for.
Right.
And so there's a lot of nuances to having a conversation about these kind of things. Lauren, righteous anger will never denigrate the other person, though. Righteous anger, and that's where you have to have a fine line here, because it can be so difficult to discern the difference between the two. Jesus criticized the practice in the temple when he overturns the money changers' tables, but he doesn't denigrate the individual, the personal autonomy, and the self-worth of the person in front of him. He criticizes the practice in anger, right? But he doesn't criticize the person and dishonor the person and devalue the person. He never does. You'll see the absolute Jesus throughout the life of Jesus always had a high view of the human worth and the human individual. And it's also a short-lived moment too. Yeah. He doesn't live in that state. Mm-hmm. Like it doesn't become him denigrating the practice doesn't become his mission. Yeah, exactly. To convince everyone of. If you stay in righteous anger if it's always righteous anger, that's probably you just being angry. I'm thinking being in ministry and church for long enough that I've seen a lot of wrong things done in the name of righteous anger. Yeah. But what they all have in common is it begins to be a place that a person lives from. Right. And their mission no longer becomes about the love of God. It becomes about making sure everybody knows how wrong this one thing is. Right. It is always rooted in a personal offense. Right. Yeah. But Jesus didn't live in that. Yeah. Right. Yeah. And that wasn't his mission. Yeah. So. Yeah. That's a great question. The difference between the New Age Hindu pursuit of oneness with the divine. That's one we'll have to address that topic on a different video. I don't think I know enough about that, to be honest. I have lots of thoughts. Yeah, you always. For sure do. Yeah. I'd have to do some research into what that pursuit looks like, because I honestly don't know. I have ideas, but it's not something I feel super qualified to. Yeah, well, it's definitely something I'll write down for the topics for future videos. So what I've noticed is that what happens in the life of a person is they experience something akin to the presence of God, whether it's a dream, a vision, a moment, whatever it happens to be, some experience of some magnitude that introduces them to the presence of God, and giving them a taste for those things. And like you said, we've seen in the New Age outreach, street outreach, not even New Age stuff, but just the street outreach, how many people have had that kind of experience but have no direction and where to go, which to me is that would be the purview of the church, that we should be in a place where we are welcoming people into deeper and deeper encounters in that sense. And then God cares so much about you that he goes about preparing you to host a greater measure of his presence. And so that's the process of repentance. That's a process of humility. That's the process of becoming like Christ, that kind of stuff. And then usually the initial experience of the presence of God is the sustained experience then, as you become familiar with what it looks like to seek his presence. It's not like it changes from the initial experience to 10 years later, right? It's the same presence. It's just now I begin to live my life around it. So I'm given the foretaste before I actually even know what the pursuit is like, and it gives me something to pursue it. And feeling his love, quite the process, absolutely. And Kim is someone who's very well familiar with the presence of the Father. And the presence of the Father is not just driven also by ecstatic experiences. No. Right? It's not like, well, I'm have enough visions, therefore I have the presence of God, or have enough supernatural experiences. We can make an idol of that as well. Let's see. Yeah, presence can be presence. Not can be. It absolutely is influenced by our understanding of God's nature, and
I think it's that God is unchanged, but we are constantly in flux and changing, right? Hopefully growing, but sometimes ungrowing. And so what we bring and our filter, how we see God, is going to, I think, shift how maybe we see or experience or understand his presence. Right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, totally. If I see God as an angry, tyrannical being, then then think about this. If that's the view I've been given by my culture, by my family of origin, by what people have said, my experience, whatever, then if God comes to me as a God of love, and I don't have a grasp of God being a God of love, those two things collide, and I've got to work out the difference between the two of them. And because I've got a view that says when God comes, he should be angry with me, but when God comes, he is loving and tender. I have no idea how to deal with that.
Well, and I think therein lies, like, a lot of us have experience, like a lot of us have trouble trusting God.
Yeah, that's very true.
Especially people who've been abused. His presence comes and it is tender and sweet. But if you have a huge trust problem, like if you have been taken advantage of, it's not that you don't experience it as kindness, but your filter goes kindness, like, that's nice, but
that's scary.
It's also scary because what comes next, and can I trust this, and is this consistent? And maybe you're just being nice to me to get something. But I think the reason God is still going to come, because then when those feelings and thoughts come, that's his invitation. Of going, I know. He's not saying, like, stop that. Look, I'm nice. He's going, I know. I understand.
That's right.
You're right. You have every right to feel afraid of me, because I get it. And he's just going to keep coming. Right. And, like, enter in now, like, you're healing. However that looks, right? Whether that's with someone helping you or your own process. But that's where the consistency of his presence is, like, amazing. Because it's just going to be there. And he's happy to continue to bring you that presence as long as you need. right? To work through that fear and that anger and that confusion and the grief and the trauma.
Right.
And I think that is what's so wonderful about his unchanging nature.
Right. And he also brings people around you that embody character traits of who he is.
Yeah.
To introduce you to a different aspect of his presence.
Absolutely. Yeah. Like
Right.
relationship builds our capacity for love and trust.
Right.
And then that extends to him.
Right.
Right. If you have a high capacity for, and you're in a safe, loving community, chances are you're going to be able to see God as a loving, safe community.
Right.
A part of that.
Right.
A part of that community is what I mean. If you're part of a community that's like unstable and manipulative or dysfunctional, it's going to be much more difficult for you to look at God as someone safe to invite into that community.
Right. Yeah. One of the things I've noticed is, and it was something that when you said, you were talking earlier about being popped out of the presence of God. Again, clarifying that it's not God that pops you out; it's our hearts that wander. It's the quote by Augustine the Great, 4th century. Our hearts are restless until they find their rest in you. And so we wander, and that foretaste of the presence of God drives us to pursue him. But it's what they tend to do is, when I've lost that sense of his presence, I heap shame upon myself, guilt upon myself. I've done something wrong, right? And in doing something wrong, God is displeased with me. And so we've read into the heart of the Father something that's not there.
Yes.
Because when the greatest example in Scripture of someone deviating from the presence of God is Adam and Eve, right? That we see that's like the very first example and one of the most clear pictures where they went and said, let's hide from God because of what we've done, right? God, in his all-knowingness, in his omniscience, when he shows up to the garden and says, Adam and Eve, where are you? It's not like he doesn't know, right?
Right.
It's not like it's that they were really good at hiding.
They weren't playing hide and seek.
No, and it's the question isn't for his sake. The Scripture is clear that God knows everything, so it's not like he's asking for the information.
Yeah.
So for him to ask, where are you, was not I don't know and I'm seeking. It's it's an invitation, right? So when he finds Adam and Eve, when they come out of hiding, and he says, what happened? That's not I'm going to kick you out now, right? Once I find out what happened. Again, it's not like he didn't know what happened.
Yeah.
It's his garden and his creation has been desecrated in that moment with the fall. So it's not exactly like he's going, what did you do? Because I don't know what you've done. We've got to remember that, because I think our picture of God, if we were to filter that into the story of Genesis, what we would anticipate is that Adam and Eve screwed up. God came into the garden and said, get the heck out of my beautiful garden. You don't deserve to be here, right? But that's absolutely not what he did. He comes in and he says, where are you? And what have you done? So he's got a conversation. Anybody that has kids knows that conversation, right? And Adam is the one who, seeing that they were naked, they were full of shame. Yeah. Not God put guilt or shame on them,
right?
But they put guilt and shame upon themselves. And so the guilt and the shame of what they had done drove them from the presence of God. God did not drive them from the presence of God. And that's an important distinction to make, because that means that when you've lost that sense of his presence, of him abiding with you, again, that sense of his touch and that he's with me and he's for me and all of that, he's not going, great, get away from me. You never should have done that.
No.
He's actually, the invitation is always there, just like the quote from Eckhart, Meister Eckhart had said. I always have a trouble with Meister Eckhart because it's too similar to Eckhart Tolle, the New Age teacher. It's completely different. This is a good Eckhart.
Yeah.
But God is in the place where you last left him. And if you're having trouble finding him, go back to where you left him. And the guilt and the shame, unfortunately, keep us from making that journey back.
Yeah, and a lot of people have been taught by teachers
that
if you lose that sense of presence, or if you backslide or you
Right.
walk away,
Yeah.
like you've done something, you've wrecked yourself. This is irreparable.
Yeah,
I
that's
think
right.
that has been projected onto a lot of people.
Right. Yeah. I love
You're
Steve.
damaged
Yeah.
now.
Steve's point that Paul came to know the presence of God by revelation. Yeah, absolutely. And he came to, like, I mean, you think about examining Paul again. Paul had a lot of thoughts about God.
Yeah.
But then he encountered God, revelation, and he comes to understand his omnipresence and his presence because by revelation. And not just by the fact that he understood words on a page. Actually, he understood words on the page better than anybody.
Yeah.
So he says, of the Pharisees, I was the most zealous.
Right.
So he knows at that point, a Pharisee, legend has it, and I think this is actually correct, that they could take any scroll from the Old Testament, take a pin and poke it through the scroll, and they could tell you exactly which Hebrew letter on each page that pin went through.
It just makes me feel like our brains have just
yes,
disintegrated, or like, what's the word? Like over time.
Right.
I don't really think anyone could do that.
Degraded.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, decayed. Yeah, Paul knew the scriptures backward and forward.
Well, he was brilliant.
Yeah, he was brilliant, absolutely brilliant. And so for his understanding of God to radically shift required encounter, which required revelation.
Yeah.
And Paul talks about some of the more significant encounters he had. You know, we've got the road to Damascus, where he encounters Jesus, and this is Jesus who you've been persecuting. And then he talks about the 2 Corinthians 12, the experience he had where he goes up to the third heaven. He talks about a trance that he had when he was in the temple in later in the book of Acts. So Paul has an absolute consistent value for revelation and walking in that place of being in the presence of God. And so my advice to anybody who's struggling with, I'm struggling with, I lose that sense that God is with me, is don't let that loss drive you to shame, because that shame is not heaped on you by the Father.
No.
Let that loss be the reminder of the loss so that you just turn your heart back.
Yeah.
It's as simple as that.
It is really that simple.
It is.
But when you're in that moment of shame,
yes,
this is where the lie comes in, right?
Right.
Telling you
Yes.
it's not that simple,
Right.
actually. Right?
Right.
Like your shame has created this massive bridge that's going to take you years of effort to cross, to get back. Like shame tells us all these really untrue things to the point where you feel like the last thing it is just turning.
Right. Yeah.
Right.
Right.
And that's where we need community to come, speak the truth.
Yeah.
And pray. And in some cases, like ask that spirit that's lying to be gone.
Yeah.
Right. There can be like a level of oppression.
Yeah, that's right.
And because I'm thinking, I know people who have that level of shame.
Right.
And in their mind now, it's not simple.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. So, well, we've been going for 30 minutes. Mm-hmm. So, anybody that you see on here that, one of the things we like to do is see anybody that could use some, maybe the Lord speaking something.
Well, I really like, this isn't that, but I really like Bert. If you go to the bottom, Berta wrote a comment. It took me 36 years to trust God. I started with small things before I could trust him with the bigger things in my life. I appreciate that comment. Yeah. Like, it's a really encouraging, that's an encouragement to us.
Right.
You don't have to start where you're going to be in 5 years.
Right.
Just start.
Right.
Right? Like, if you struggle to connect with God, then just start with something little.
Right.
Right. Give him something to trust with that maybe isn't the biggest thing in your life or the hardest thing. Start with something small and expect him to show up and care for it, and then keep going.
Right.
Even if you feel that shame, or that like you've done something wrong by disconnecting yourself, know that that's not true. You haven't.
Yeah.
You know, and go back to, I mean, even just to break down that quote a little bit, the last place you found God, right? Like what that can mean is just think back to a dream or a time when you were praying, time when you felt safe with God.
Yeah, go back to that.
Whatever it was in your mind, just visualize that or go back to it.
Right.
And start there. Ask him to come into that experience again.
Right.
And meet you.
Yeah, absolutely.
You know, and trust that, like, let yourself trust that he's going to be there.
Right.
And if that's too hard, find someone that you do trust in your life and ask them to do it with you.
Right. Yeah.
Right. It's okay to bring other people into that as well.
Right.
Have someone sit and pray with you.
Yeah. I think, is David Boda, are you still there? I think I may have just a small encouragement for David if he's still listening. So I like what you said to Berta. That's absolutely true. David, let us know if you're still there. Please. I think Lauren's right. Maybe he's asking where are you in your trust and journey with me? Yeah, absolutely. I think that is the where are you question. At least something akin to that. It's not information for God. It's information for them.
Yeah.
So it's like when I talk with my kids.
Right. We ask them, like, what happened? What did you do? When we already know because the evidence is right there.
Yeah, exactly.
But you're giving them a chance to like own it and explain.
Right. Yeah, that's right.
You know, and you're basically inviting a conversation.
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
I don't think David Boda is here anymore.
No. Okay. Well, I know you actually have, Erin actually has a meeting coming up, so we've got to.
Oh, he's here.
Oh, he is here. Oh, David. Okay, so I just a simple thing for David. It's like I saw God. I saw you typing out. Couldn't quite see what it was that you were typing, but you were typing on a keyboard, computer keyboard, not an old typewriter or anything like that. And I just felt like the Lord was giving you words to say, and it was like something was being communicated in what you were typing out that wasn't just David typing, but there was specific things that you were writing down that were orchestrated and ordained by God. He was giving you, quote unquote, the words to say, although you're not speaking them out. What I saw, you were typing them. So there was just an ability to communicate what needed to be communicated through what you were typing. So that was just a small encouragement, David, that God has the things you need to communicate to the people you're trying to communicate to. So that was it. I don't know if you have anything to add or not.
I think so.
Yeah. So, okay, everybody, we're going to wrap this one up. And thanks for being with us. And again, thank you, Kim, for your kind words. We love you guys there in Calgary. If you have questions you want us to address, post those there, send us a message, and we will do our best to get to those things. So we go live. We won't be live next Thursday because I will be flying to Texas. So we will be resuming after that. So, okay, bless everybody, and until next time.
Yep.
Bye.
All right.
Bye.